What's up guys, it's Nosh here. Today we're going to be talking about why invest in income producing rental properties. And the key word here is income producing. With that being said, let's get started. Why do we purchase income producing rental properties? Why do we purchase real estate at all? You might be thinking it's to increase our financial wealth, to become rich. We don't work hard just to acquire several pieces of paper with somebody's face on it. Money is just the materialistic tool that allows us to do that. When you purchase real estate, you actually increase your net worth through something called capital appreciation. And what that really means is that the value of your home is likely to increase over a number of years. In hot real estate markets like Toronto and Vancouver, one's net worth can dramatically increase through capital appreciation a lot faster than they could ever expect from a 9-to-5 job. This means those who own real estate are in a completely separate socioeconomic class, the rich class or the wealthy class. Now, does this mean you're greedy? Absolutely not. After all, there could be expenses in your everyday life that you hope to offset through the income coming from income producing rental properties. Or perhaps you're trying to leave behind a system of wealth for your beneficiaries, like your spouse or your children. Perhaps you just don't want to work that 9-to-5 job right up until you retire. What if you could retire early? What if you could choose which job to work instead of having to take any job that comes your way? What happens in retirement years when the cost of living goes up, food and groceries go up, gas goes up, rent goes up, interest rates go up? Having an investment vehicle such as an income producing rental property can really help to insulate you from those type of concerns and those type of financial worries. Imagine if you could invest a limited number of years, let's say 10, in your solid prime working years, but then you get to enjoy the rest of your life, travel the world, and spend time with your loved ones and your friends, and not have to worry about where the money is coming from. This is exactly what the rich and wealthy are continuously trying to do by hiring assistants and daily planners and managers simply to buy themselves more free time. After all, what is all that wealth really worth if you don't have the time to enjoy it? So why the need for more? There's absolutely nothing wrong with desiring a better quality of life than the one we have today. The only one, however, who we should be comparing ourselves to is who we were yesterday and who we were last year. The question we need to ask ourselves is, how can I become financially free and not have to spend 30, 35, or even 50 years of my life in order to get there? Now, my personal belief, through my own experience, has shown me that real estate is the answer, but not just buying any kind of real estate. Anybody can go out there and buy a bad property. Anybody can go out there and buy a great property, but that doesn't perform well, and the numbers require a majority of your disposable income to be sunk into the property where you have no other money to get by. Neither of those scenarios are any good. An income producing property allows you to not only pay off your operating costs, but to receive something in return on a month-to-month basis so that you can grow through economy of scale. That's the magic in an income producing rental property. If your goal is to ultimately build wealth through real estate, then it's absolutely important that the properties you purchase are income producing rental properties. In places like Toronto or Vancouver, or in the States, San Francisco or New York, it's hard enough purchasing one property, yet alone purchasing a rental property on top of that. And that is why in some cities, it may actually be too late to purchase a rental property that can provide you with additional income every month. If you were to purchase a rental property in any one of those cities, unless you put a sizable down payment, it's highly unlikely that the rental income coming in every month is going to cover your mortgage obligations on a monthly basis. To put some of your disposable income forward just doesn't make financial sense. Assuming that you even tried to and you felt that I'm going to push for it and I'm going to do everything I can to make that happen, there's only so much that you can grow because you're limited based off of how much you can use from your disposable income to purchase real estate. To illustrate this point, let's assume you purchased a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom condo unit in downtown Vancouver. In 2022, this condo unit would cost you approximately $1 million. And according to Canadian mortgage laws, any property worth more than $1 million requires a 20% down, in this case $200,000. This would leave your mortgage at $800,000. Now, according to interest rates in 2022, if you were to purchase a property with a mortgage of $800,000, your mortgage payment every month would run you roughly about $3,800. This doesn't include your condo fees or your property tax or maintenance or any of that sort of thing. This is strictly your your mortgage amount. So with that being said, the rental income coming from a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom downtown Vancouver condo unit is not likely to grant you $3,800 every month. And this means you're out of pocket. So now you're using your disposable income in order to cover the cost of a rental property. And this is assuming that you're lucky enough that the rental property doesn't go vacant for X period of time. This is why we're constantly looking for income producing rental properties. Now, does this mean that based off of where you live, purchasing a rental property is a far-fetched idea, that it's never going to be possible, that the numbers just don't work and you have to give up all hope? Absolutely not. All it means is that when purchasing a rental property based off of where you live, you may need to look a little bit further from home. 10 hours away from Vancouver, for example, is Calgary. 12 hours away from Vancouver is Edmonton, assuming you're driving. Now, these markets are still in Canada. You can still purchase a good-sized home. You get a lot more bang for your buck. I understand those living in Vancouver or even Toronto, for example, might think, well, you know, that's Alberta and the market value of these homes are not rising the way they are in Toronto or Vancouver. I get that. But you got to remember, we're talking about investing for income-producing properties. We're not talking about investing for appreciation in the value of the property, because when you invest for appreciation, that's considered gambling, not investing. You're gambling on the fact that the market for real estate is likely to go up. What happens if you did that in 2007 and come 2008 we have the market crash? So now let's look at the numbers. A condo unit in downtown Calgary or Edmonton that's worth $400,000 requires the same 20% down because it's an investment property, but the difference here is 20% of $400,000 is $80,000. 20% of $1 million is $200,000. That's $120,000 difference. That means starting earlier in the game and allowing yourself to pay off that property a lot quicker and sooner. Now, the mortgage left behind after putting 20% down on that condo unit in Calgary or Edmonton means that you're carrying a mortgage balance of $320,000. Now, the mortgage on $320,000, at least in 2022, is going to run you roughly about $1,500 per month. Now, that's a substantial difference. The rental income that you can get from a nice downtown condo in Calgary or Edmonton could be anywhere from $2,000 a month and higher. Now, it's worth taking note that as the real estate market progresses and as price of real estate continues to go up, what we are going to see is cities that perhaps were more ideal for income producing rental properties suddenly shift and become ideal for capital appreciation properties. And now that's not necessarily a bad thing if you own real estate. However, if you're trying to purchase real estate, what it ultimately means is that it's going to be more expensive. You're either going to have to put up larger down payments or be in a position where you can take on larger mortgages, or you're going to have to settle for a less home for your buck. And realistically, what we have seen is it's a combination of the two. We have to put in more money and we get less home for our buck. And that, unfortunately, is the way that real estate is going. But it's been that case for the last 50 years, and it's likely to get worse in the next 50, which is why purchasing real estate sooner than later is ideal. And if you have an income producing rental property, it's likely to stay an income producing rental property. Even when the market fluctuates with real estate and price of homes go up and down, the rent generally tends to stay fairly modest and fairly even. So if you're positive cash flow from the time you purchase, because over time rent is likely to increase, it's very likely that you're going to stay positive cash flow for the entire time that you own that property, i.e. 25, 30 years. If you ask yourself, when was the best time to buy real estate? And when is the best time to buy real estate? Well, realistically, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, were really good times to purchase real estate. In fact, in Vancouver, even as far back as 10 years ago, were good times to purchase real estate. Because what we've seen in the last decade is that the price of real estate in the housing market in Canada has accelerated so fast that people who owned real estate were able to see tremendous profits appear practically out of thin air. Just consider townhouses in Hamilton, Ontario, for example. In 2020, the average townhouse cost about $800,000. In 2022, the average townhouse in Hamilton, Ontario costs $1 million. So if you owned a townhouse in 2020 in Hamilton, Ontario, you saw an appreciation in the value of your home go up by $100,000 per year. That's about $10,000 per month in appreciation. That's a lot faster than we can make in our 9-to-5 job. So in a way, it's bittersweet because homeowners today, we want our homes to go up in value. The more our home goes up in value, the happier we feel. We feel great that our home is skyrocketing. I mean, that means money in our pocket. What does it mean for our children? Does it mean that they are forced to rent for the rest of their lives or rely on the inheritance that they may or may not receive? We talk about wealth and inequality, especially within the middle class, and we speak about the middle class slowly disappearing. In 25 years' time, it could very likely boil down to who owns a home and who doesn't, who's rich and who's poor. We have to consider that aspect. If we have income producing rental properties that we can leave behind for our children, it provides them another source of an option, whether they want to continue to receive the income come from that property or they want to reside in that property and have a roof over their head and not have to have the majority of their disposable income go towards their cost of living. Now we're going to talk about breaking even here because some of the people who I've spoken to, when I talk about income producing rental properties, I hear the comment that I'd be okay if I just break even. If I could just break even, I'd be okay with that. I don't need to make money as long as I don't lose any money. The problem with breaking even, especially when it just covers your mortgage, is that you're still out of pocket. If your rental income coming in only covers your mortgage expense going out, then you're still left with certain expenses like utilities, property tax, and maintenance. And if you have a property manager, that as well. And so now you're dipping into your disposable income, which is why when we're running our numbers in the beginning, when we're considering a rental property, we have to be sure that we leave a cushion, a margin of safety, so that in the event of certain cost increases and our numbers may not be where we thought it would be, we're still in the positive side. We're still in the green side. Maybe we didn't walk away with a positive cash flow of $500 every month like we anticipated. Maybe we had to settle for $100 every month. It's still better than breaking even. Another way to look at it is that if it's an income producing property, even by $100 a month, you're being paid $100 every month to own that property. There's a big difference, a very big difference. Breaking even is not somewhere where you want to be because it leaves very little room for anything to go wrong. The moment one cost go up, even on a month-to-month basis, it means that you might be dipping into your disposable income. Especially if you want to grow through economy of scale and purchase a third or fourth rental property, it's so important that you stay in the green. It's so important that you don't break even and you make a little bit of profit every month from the property. If you receive positive cash flow from an income-producing rental property of $100 every month, that translates to an extra $1,200 every year in your pocket. The banks look at that and they're able to also further increase your annual income when it comes to qualifying you for another mortgage down the line. However, if the property costs you $100 every month, then that means you have to come up with $1,200 by the end of the year to put towards your property. You have to find that $1,200. Now, if that happened on a scale of 2 or 3 or 4 different properties, it certainly can add up. Sometimes there is no option but to increase the rent. Sometimes increasing that rent can make it or break it for a property. However, there's only so much you can increase rent by before you ultimately can't find a tenant. So there's only so much margin of error that we have when we assess a rental property. Another problem with breaking even is you might think to yourself, okay, you know what? This is my only debt. I don't have a car loan. I don't have, other loans going on. I only have this one property. So out of my disposable income, even though my tenant is paying the rent and my mortgage payment is covered by the tenant, I'm losing out maybe $500 every month in property tax and utilities and maintenance and so on and so forth. So it's only costing me $500 a month. My question to you would be, in the event of a vacancy and you cannot find a suitable tenant to replace a tenant who's moving out, what then do your costs look like? Are you then going to be able to find that amount of money that's required to cover all your operating expenses? Further to that question, the other part is, for how long can you go without having a tenant occupy your rental property? Experts suggest that you should have between 4 to 6 months of unforeseen expenses saved up. If you're already in the hole starting out, it makes it that much harder to be able to acquire an emergency fund for situations like that. Whereas if the property is giving you $100 a month or $1,200 $1,000 a year, it makes it a little bit easier to save up for unforeseen expenses. Just think about it. As a homeowner, when the furnace breaks down, now it costs $4,000 to replace. When the toilet breaks down, it's going to cost you anywhere from $300, $350 to replace the toilet. Typically, when a tenant moves out, there's always costs involved. There's always a bit of damage left behind, and you might think, okay, I have a security deposit if you're in a place that allows you to charge a security deposit for damages incurred. I mean, Toronto and Vancouver are two places that don't allow this. So usually it means trying to go after the tenant for those damages to be reimbursed. But somebody's got to come up with that money right off the hop in order to get those repairs done. And it's important that you have that money aside. If you're breaking even, again, now you're at a point where it's more money out of the pocket. However, if you were at a positive cash flow scenario, it's possible that you've saved up that money over a period of time, that you have it for these unforeseen expenses. If anything breaks down, like appliances need to be changed, ideally every 10 years, hot water tank, so on and so forth. So depending on whether you have a condo or a house is going to come with a bit more in maintenance. A condo is going to come with condo fees that are required, and more or less they tend to balance themselves out depending on where the property is located, depending on the age of the property, and it depends on a lot of various factors as well. So now let's go into positive cash flow. By now you obviously have a very good understanding of what that might look like. Positive cash flow can be defined as the net income that is generated from a business. When we're talking about rental properties as a business, our net income can be also defined as our rental income. So when we look at rental properties and compare it to a business generates its profits by having its revenue, which is the money coming into the property, i.e. through goods and services, cover the operating expenses like storage, warehouse facilities, employees, etc. And the money left over is their profit, or their net income in other words. But just consider a rental property that's providing you with $500 in positive cash flow every month. Now, $500 in positive cash flow every month means you're receiving a healthy $6,000 every year. Now, $6,000 might not sound like a lot of money to some people, and it might seem like a relatively low and modest figure over a period of a 12-month cycle. Imagine owning this property for a period of 25 years, which is the longest amortization period you can take for a rental property. At the end of 25 years, not only is the principal amount of your mortgage paid off by that tenant, means that your bank account will now hold $150,000. So this is just from the $500 of positive cash flow coming in every month. And that's assuming that over the 25-year period, the rent was never increased. Another important thing to note is that by receiving $500 in positive cash flow every month, your rent would have to drop by 40% just to break even. Now consider, even in the 2008 housing crash, rental rates did not even drop anywhere near 40%. In Canada, it was even less. And that's because regardless of the housing market, regardless of even the stock market, regardless of even Facebook's metaverse, people still need a roof over their head. They still need a place to live. Generally speaking, tenants are going to put a higher level of priority and more emphasis on ensuring that their rent is paid every month, even if it means going late on their vehicle payments or insurance payments, or not going to the movies once every week, etc. And that's because there's a general understanding that if they go late on their rent or they don't pay their rent at all, they're going to be kicked out of the rental property and therefore lose the roof over their head. So that provides landlords with a little bit more of an insurance policy that there is going to be money coming in to help offset the mortgage costs. But when we look at the same concept, a homeowner is very likely to make sure that their own personal mortgage is paid for their principal residence before the mortgage is paid for a rental property. And this is why the banks only require 5% down on your principal residence as opposed to 20% down on a rental property. That's because they generally believe that if your back was in a corner and you only had enough funds to pay for one mortgage, you would likely choose to pay for the mortgage on your principal residence so that you don't lose your own home, compared to a rental property that if it gets taken away, you don't really feel like you've lost so much in personal value. With that being said, some ways that you can try your best to ensure you constantly have tenants to occupy your rental property or properties, and that you don't hold on to a high vacancy rate, is to buy properties in good locations. I've always believed that it's better to buy a good property in a great location compared to a great property in a okay location. A bad location you never want to buy in, so that's out of the question. And that's because if you buy a property in a great location, like for example downtown or next to the water, you're realistically going to likely always have tenants willing to occupy that property, and therefore you're not not likely to sit on a property vacant for too long, if at all. This ultimately will reduce your fears and worries when it comes to holding on to a rental property. Now, it's relatively impossible for me to go one by one and list out every single great location out there. But realistically, there are some things that you can look out for that would indicate that the location you're considering is a relatively good location. Look at the path of growth. If you consider the older maps of that area and then you compare them to the new maps of that area and perhaps see a few maps in between, it will give you that path of growth. Another good option is go down to your local permit office and talk with the city and find out where a lot of the permits are being granted for. Ask them, where is the growth going in the city, in which direction, and then consider looking at those areas so that when those areas become fully developed, you are essentially in the path of growth. If you wait too long until you hear it on the news that development projects are going on in a certain area of the city, that construction is going on in a certain area of the city, if you wait until it comes on the news, unfortunately by then the property prices have already increased. It doesn't mean that it's too late to get into the game, it just means that there was an opportunity there that perhaps you missed out on. Another thing to consider is, are people moving into the city or are people moving out of the city? What was the population like a year ago? What's the population like today? And what's the population forecast to be a year from now? Thank you guys for taking the time to watch my video. I hope you liked it and I hope you learned something. If you did, hit the like and subscribe button down below. It helps me to grow my channel and continue putting out great content for you guys. Leave me a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you.